of the things I'm really grateful for, I have a team of believers who come into my restaurant about once a month and pray over my business. That has just been such a huge blessing. I can't stress that enough. I mean, and there's a group of ladies that will come in and just pray, like in the middle of a Saturday, right? I mean, I've got customers that come in, they won't make a scene, but they'll just come in, they'll sit, and they'll pray, all that. But we were facing some very stressful challenges several months ago in business, and I was very stressed and anxious, and I had a teammate who came with me, and we walked around my business like the walls of Jericho, and we just prayed at like midnight. I'm sure people driving by thought we were crazy.
Hey y'all, we're about to get into a great episode because this is not a vocational minister, missionary, pastor, or anything like this. This is a business owner that I'm talking to today. And we're going to be talking about how he's blending his business and his ministry together, not just passively, not just I'm trying to live the Christian life in front of my employees. No, he's actually intentionally trying to share the gospel, intentionally trying to find ways to have those gospel conversations. So I'm all for living the Christian life in front of people because that's important. But if we stop there, we're not really doing what we need to be doing as believers, and that is make disciples. So without further ado, let's welcome my guest, Brian Stevens. I'm just curious, before we get into any questions, could you give us like a 36,000-foot view of who you are, what you do, just the day-to-day stuff?
Yeah. So me and my wife and my kids have lived a life of cross-cultural work for a while now. But our journeys took a few twists and turns. So we, from South Carolina originally, we made the move to New York City in 2013, where we served as full-time cross-cultural workers for about 5 years. And there we served among unreached peoples. These are peoples with less, very small Christian population, very minimal church exposure or church planting work among them. We'll work there for 5 years, and then we made a transition to Cincinnati, Ohio, where we have transitioned into the business world. So we're no longer career ministers, but we run a business here in Cincinnati. And we continue to use our resources and our jobs and our networking, and everything that we do is aimed at expanding God's kingdom among unreached immigrant peoples.
So you said you went from I would assume like a nonprofit world, that you were part of some kind of charity or NGO or something, and then you transitioned to the business world. And then you start talking about doing business for the sake of God's kingdom, expanding God's kingdom. So what in the world are you talking about? Because let's be honest, a lot of Christian business people don't necessarily see doing business, or let's just say Christians in general, don't necessarily see doing business as a kingdom initiative. So why transition to the business world? Talk to us like we're 2 years old and you're trying to explain it to us.
So, there was a few things that went through our minds as we were considering our transition. One, I needed to provide for my family, so that was simple on that end. Is that I needed a steady income, but a few other things that were happening before we went into the full-time nonprofit world. I had already worked at a restaurant for many years, and that was what I did through high school and college. And I had been in leadership roles in restaurant businesses before we moved to New York City. So I had been in that world. And I had already seen that world could put you into contact with various people. And so we've seen that as something that is a way to meet people. And so when we moved to Cincinnati and we're thinking through our options, we went into the business world and started working in a local business. Later would pursue owning our own business, but at the time we were working in another one. And I just began to see doors open because there was never a question of what I did for a living. If I was a full-time minister and I was talking to people outside of the church or outside of God's kingdom didn't always understand what I did for a living. But by working in a business, it was just very, very legitimate, very easy to understand. I could relate with people pretty easily, especially being in the restaurant industry. So many people are employed there, and so I could really relate with people. And so it just provided like a natural platform to meet people, but then also allowed me to provide for my family. And so it kind of checked a few boxes there. And then over time, we've continued to explore how does the nonprofit and business world intersect? How do they blend? Because I think there's values in blending those, and so it's been a bit of a journey that continues to evolve over time.
So you had said something that I talk about quite a bit. So you talked about connecting with people, blending the two, relating with people. So one of the things I've often been amazed at is there's this I guess a misunderstanding of missionaries, people who do cross cultural work full time as a vocational missionary, that somehow they're just sitting there, or I just use the word sitting there, but hanging out in their community 80 hours a week sharing the gospel with the people around them, as if missionaries have nothing else to do with their lives, or that the people they're trying to reach have nothing better to do with their lives than to sit around waiting for us to talk to them. It was always amazing to me that, when I lived in China, and I've talked about this, just going shopping, just for our daily needs it was like a task in and of itself. And it wasn't as simple as going to a Walmart in the US where everything is under one roof. And, if you want to go to Walmart, but it took us 5 different stores or look. So let me give you an example. We had a general place, supermarket that would be considered like the Chinese version of Walmart that had quite a bit. So we were able to get quite a bit of stuff there, but they didn't have everything. So then we had to go to a Costco type store, which was from Germany. And we had to buy some, specialty things there that the Chinese supermarkets could not or would not import. Then we had to get our beef because I didn't care for beef in China because it had this strange taste to it. So we went to this Muslim butcher, which took about an hour round trip just to get a few pounds of beef. And so it was very time consuming just to do simple tasks like that on top of, my son going to preschool and all this other stuff and homeschooling our daughter at the time. But it's interesting. So through that time, before that, I would say my mindset was similar to that in the sense that I thought the only way to really, really share the gospel with people was you had to be this vocational missionary. Okay, you had to be full-time, you had to be funded, you had to be salaried, whatever you want to call it. And so everyone doing business was wasting their time. But then over time, my thinking has shifted dramatically because as I began to see missionaries who are doing business legitimately, and I'm not talking about fake businesses, which is another topic in and of itself, but legitimate business that is for profit, making profit for the sake of your family, for the sake of your employees, for the sake of the community. I began to see that there are tons of opportunities to share, to meet people in a more natural setting that doesn't feel awkward. But also, I would say, if done well, greater opportunities to share and make a bigger impact. So as you were talking, there was a question that came to mind, and it's not something I prompted you for, so I hope you got an answer, at least some kind of answer off the top of your head. But I'm curious, do you have, you talked about relating the business or blending, the words you used were blending the business and ministry together, but you also acknowledge the struggles of doing that. And I 100% agree. There are tremendous struggles in doing that. I'm in the process of that myself. But do you have ministry goals that apply to your business setting that you're trying to pursue that a traditional business person obviously wouldn't be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I have a few things going on. I have people that work for me from various places, and some of those are from places where the gospel is not known or is not proclaimed abundantly. And so, a few things I'm doing. One, in my business, I'm trying to create an atmosphere that it creates that create that sorry, that treats everyone with honor, dignity, and respect. So by creating that atmosphere, I'm already trying to treat everyone well who comes in my business, customer and employee. And then I work to expose. I do have gospel conversations in my business. I'm not afraid to talk about those. Um, contrary to popular opinion or popular belief, there are no legal consequences for talking about the gospel in your workplace as long as you're not harassing people, and so it's perfectly legal. A few things I'm doing is I'm seeking to expose people to the gospel, maybe some for the very first time. And then I'm also networked in with a local nonprofit that I also serve with on a volunteer basis. And so I also have a team of individuals who may not be formally linked to my business, but are also friends with some of my employees that are integrated into the community I do business with, and they serve the community in various ways. And so the business becomes one of many points of contact for communities that largely don't have a church presence. I don't know if that answers your question. I probably could be more specific. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, no, it does. I was thinking of a guy I met, and I'm not going to mention what country he's in, but he has a business, and he went over there as a missionary. It was in Asia, and he got discouraged because when they went over there, he gave up his job in the IT industry, and and then as he was over there, he felt like he got sucked back into the IT industry. And I can't remember why he started. I think it was more of a guy he met that was in the industry, a local guy, and he needed some help with something. So, in the effort of, I guess, connecting with people and building relationships, he decided to help them. But at the end of this first year, he got so discouraged, he came back to the States. And thankfully, the elders of his church had the the knowledge and the, I guess, the wisdom to challenge him and say, I think you need to go back and instead of going back the traditional way like you had hoped, and go back and start an IT business in the field that you're an expert in. So eventually he agreed. He did go back to the same country and he started it. And within 5 years, I think it was, he had over 3,000 employees.
Mm-hmm.
And in the process, now granted, the pay scale is not as where he's at. The pay scale is not like where you're at. So, there's a reason why he can have 3,000 employees. Of course, the scale of his business was different too, because he was dealing with major technology companies around the world. And so, but the cool thing I found out about his business was not only did he have a business plan, he had a ministry plan and how he was connecting with people. He had ways of having those gospel conversation without forcing them on the people. And in fact, they had some Americans come in, some non-believing Americans come in that they were applying for a grant for their business. And the Americans got angry at him because he was offering Bible studies. He was doing all this stuff from a ministry standpoint. And the funny thing was, it was the Muslims and the Hindus who came to his defense because they were going to deny his grant because of everything he was doing on a ministry side. But the Muslims and Hindus came to his defense and saying, are you kidding me? This is the best employer we've ever had. Yes, he offers these things, but he doesn't force them on us. We don't feel threatened by him. We don't feel he's trying to manipulate us. He actually treats us very, very well, and we respect him for that. And we don't care that he's doing these things based on his faith. And so in the end, he got the grant. But it was one of those moments that proved to me that business and ministry actually go together. I do like what you said about networking with other people. Like you mentioned the nonprofit. I know there's other ways to do it, like with churches and things like that, but you have an intentional plan in place that's networking with other believers that are somehow trying to help them connect with people that you're interacting with. Now, I don't know if you can say this, and if you can't, you can't. Just tell me. But you had mentioned to me that you are situated in a certain type of community. Are you allowed to say what that looks like?
Yeah, to a degree. Yeah, I can talk about that. So, when we were looking at doing business in Cincinnati, when we first moved here, we were working in a business. We did not operate our own. Then we began exploring how to operate our own. But one of the things that I've kind of there's a phrase that I use that I use a lot over the past few years, and that's I've been trying to make sure that my life is oriented toward unreached peoples, so that I'm trying to make decisions where that maximizes my contact with people groups that are largely outside of God's kingdom, those ethnic groups that have very little gospel access. And so I'm trying to make conscious decisions. We began to look at Cincinnati Metro, the whole metro area. So there's just under 3 million people that live in the metro area. So not in New York City by any means, but still there's a population there. And we were looking at where business should be done if we were going to try to impact peoples. And so that automatically ruled out some neighborhoods and some communities. If we were trying to maximize our contact toward particular groups of people that had little gospel access, then we would need to do business in the areas of the metro area that had concentrations of those people. And so while we were looking at options, there was a few sections of the city that opened up as potential places, and then we just began to pray over options, and then God opened a door in a particular area of Cincinnati, and it was very clear that God was leading us there because He was closing other doors at the same time, and so it helped narrow that down a little bit. And so we now do business in an area of Cincinnati that is in proximity of large concentrations of people from unreached regions of the world. And so that allows me to hire from that community, to serve that community as my customers, and just find other ways just to network and partner in. Then, of course, partnering with some local nonprofits that are also serving those communities help maximize that area. So we were intentional in the areas we were going to do business. And there were just some areas that we did not want to do business in because we felt called to specific people in a specific place. And so we ruled out some areas of the city and we're looking at other areas, is how that worked.
So I love what you said about being oriented toward UPGs. You had talked about being, or I know you didn't get into the details of the people around you, but you definitely got I guess very focused on a very certain type of group of, or certain group of people, religious bloc or whatever it is. I'm curious, actually, as you were saying that, I was thinking, this question came to mind, and I don't want to forget this. So the type of business you're in and the type of business you were in. So prior to New York City, I know the company you worked for, I believe it was the same one you went into initially before you got into the one you're in today. So could you have, so you're in this location in Cincinnati based on the demographics of the type of people you're trying to serve from a ministry standpoint, which is, I love it. Could you have taken that business that you're in now, or even got further into the business you were in previously and made more money elsewhere?
There was the option, yes. There may have been options to make more money in some areas that may not have aligned with our calling, but we had to make some choices, and so I want to provide for my family, of course, but yeah, we had to make choices based on where we felt God was leading, and we felt very strongly God was leading us toward particular groups of people that largely are outside of God's kingdom. And so even if that meant maybe a less profitable avenue, I mean, still need to make profit, still need to pay the bills, still need to provide for my kids, but it really has to be aligned with God's mission. And so that was the driving factor. And as long as I knew that we could make some profit, so that I didn't go out of business, then we were okay with that. And so, but the driving factor was particular neighborhoods for in areas of the city based on what kinds of people living there, and that's what drove us.
Okay, so that's what I was hoping you would say, something along those lines. Like I said, before we got on here, just some circumstances in my life kind of just hindered my ability to write out too many questions in advance. But I was really hoping you would say something along those lines, because I really wanted to point that out. You know, if we're going to reach the world, if we're going to go to these people, as you're talking about, the unreached people groups, the UPGs, if we're going to go to the communities where people have least access to the gospel, as you're describing, then it's going to require that Christians think outside a traditional box. Now, in all fairness, obviously there needs to be Christian business owners in places like where you're from, which is where I live, or the area. And yes, there are places that are going to be far more profitable than where you're at. I can only imagine they're going to be far more profitable than where you're at. But at the same time, there's a level of trusting in God that He's going to take care of it, which I'm sure He is. I mean, your business isn't exactly a poor business. It's a decent business to have, but you're not choosing it based on where you can get the most money or how much more money you can make. Because I sometimes wonder if we do business in the Christian sense of I have to go where I can make the most money because I've got to take care of my family, but no one can define what that actually means. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, but taking it from the standpoint of going to a place based on a kingdom decision first, rather than a family decision first, because God's going to always take care of, I mean, if we're following Him, in reality, I don't think any Christian would disagree with this. If we're following Him, if we're going to where He wants us to go, irregardless of whether we could do more or better or make more money somewhere else,
Mm-hmm.
He's going to take care of us. I mean, that's biblical reality. And so I love the fact that you went in there with that frame of mind first. Obviously, and I'm not going to deny, you do want to take care of your family. That's why you got into the business. You have your kid, you have your wife, and but you have your ministry too, and you wanted to connect better with people. So it was kind of all or nothing, I would assume. It's got to hit all those points, not just one point. I mean, you also have to think, sometimes I think when I lived in China, some of the businesses workers, cross-cultural workers was based on more of the kingdom part rather than the family part. Like they didn't mix it. It was more of strictly about the kingdom, and then the businesses weren't doing very well, which affected the family. So that's not good either. Okay, and they were picking businesses that sometimes didn't even make sense. I mean, there was a guy I met that picked a business in Southeast Asia, and it was a business that a lot of workers do, and it's legitimate in many places, but where he was at, it was illegitimate, and it took him 2 years to figure it out.
Yeah.
Because after 2 years, the Muslim community around him, the elders came up to him and asked him how he was surviving, because they knew how much his profits were. They generally knew how much his expenses were based on, local knowledge, and they couldn't figure out. It didn't match up.
Mm-hmm.
And his expenses were about 10 times higher than his profits for his business, which caused him to rethink everything. And he said he almost lost everything, but then it took him 2 years to figure out how to do it right. So he completely switched to business, went into a business that actually fit his skill sets and his wife's upbringing, and turned it into a business that was not only making money, but employing locals, and he gained the trust back.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's so much to this that we could talk about, but I want to circle back to your local partners. You talked about churches, NGOs.
Mm-hmm.
I know in an email you sent to me, you talked about international student ministries, which I know is separate from you. But I'm just curious, like how are you how are you partnering through either your business or your family, or however you want to talk about it? How are you partnering with these various groups that are in Cincinnati to reach the unreached that live there?
So I partner a few different ways, and so there's one nonprofit here that I partner with very closely. I serve on their board of directors, and so I partner with them, and they do English class for immigrants, and I do help them with the English class as well, and have even found employees through the English class. It's really awesome to meet people and give them a job and to get to know them. I partner with them in that way with this one nonprofit. There's also international student ministries at universities like the University of Cincinnati that I am not directly hands-on involved with, but I've networked with, and so I may make a donation from the business, like donate gift cards to come to my restaurant and eat, and take their students. So to take students from different countries and bring them into the restaurant and get a free meal. To partner with them in that way, just to bless them and also to bring them into the business, and just increasing the contact of us with the unreached peoples. And so the international student ministries, I just partner with that way, not a direct way like I do English class and others. But then we just have a team. I mean, one of the things I'm really grateful for, and it's just been a huge blessing, is that I have a team of believers who come into my restaurant about once a month and pray over my business. And that has just been such a huge blessing. I can't stress that enough. I mean, and there's a group of ladies that will come in and just pray, like in the middle of a Saturday, right? I mean, I've got customers that are coming in. They won't make a scene, but they'll just come in, they'll sit, and they'll pray over my business. Um, I've even had a teammate and me when we were facing some real challenges. I won't get into all that, but we were facing some very stressful challenges several months ago in business, and I was very stressed and anxious and very challenging. I had a teammate who came with me, and we walked around my business like the walls of Jericho, and we just prayed at like midnight. I'm sure people driving by thought we were crazy. But I mean, it's just such an awesome. It was just really great, and it put my heart at ease. And we just walked around my business, around the building, over and over again, just prayed, and we prayed to almost 1 a.m. Uh, and it's just so we have those people who are just blessing our business in a spiritual way, and that's been huge. And then I've also got people who come in my business who just come in just to speak to my employees, who just have a Christ centered relationship with, and just to befriend them. And so there's a few different angles, I guess, we have going on here. But it's not just me. I mean, I'm surrounded by a lot of really good people, and so that's I have to stress that too.
I think that's the key of what you were saying. You're surrounded by a good group of people. And I love that you call them a team. And I love that, I guess you said there are ladies that come in once a month.
Yes, yeah, once a month, usually on a Saturday, and just pray. Yeah.
I mean, anyone watching or listening, I mean, that is like something anyone can do. I mean, anyone could
Mhm.
find a Christian-owned business that's got a heart for the Great Commission, a heart to make disciples. Somehow, I know every business owner, their strategy is going to be different, but just simply going in and praying over a business like this and just partnering. I mean, that's no different. I mean, we're quick to pray for missionaries. We're quick to pray for military in our country. But are we quick to pray for Christian business owners, and not just that they would not be attacked by the left, because that tends to be what draws people to pray for certain businesses, in my opinion. But how often are we actually partnering with businesses like Brian's that has an intentional, Great Commission, kingdom-minded plan to go in and almost treat them like a missionary far off, or some minister or pastor in some like Utah or something? I mean, why can't we treat businesses like that? I almost think that if even the businesses in my church, at the business owners, because we have a lot of business owners in my church, if they would see that, if the people in our church would see them as that, I think it would change the trajectory of their businesses and how they even approach business. Because too often, I think we elevate missionaries, people in vocational ministry, we elevate them way too much. And as someone who's been in that, or who is still, I guess, still in that arena from a quote vocational standpoint, but it gets elevated way too much, in my opinion. And we don't do enough to elevate business owners and people in the marketplace or in the secular workforce who are trying to be intentionally kingdom minded where they're at. Your business, without giving details, is it like because just as some of the words you described, kind of your ministry approach? Is it in a stronger immigrant community or more of an Anglo community or what? Kind of like where you come from?
Mhm. It is my business is in a very diverse community. There are various communities, like various separate communities in there. I mean, over a given day, I might hear 4 or 5 different languages spoken in my dining room in my restaurant. It's in a very diverse community. It's even hard sometimes to pinpoint which what ethnic group might be the most represented, but it's fairly diverse from a population standpoint.
I'm
Yeah.
a little jealous of that. I sometimes wish I could hear more languages around me. It's actually nice when I do run into someone like that, either at Costco or Chick-fil-A or something, and I hear something. Actually, yesterday I went to Chick-fil-A twice, and two different people, and they both worked there, and they both had British accents. I was like, where'd you guys come from?
Wow.
So even though they're English speakers, it was just cool. I just love being around the diversity that you're talking about. So I'm curious, because of the diversity and where you live, like what are there challenges you're facing, like maybe your employees are facing that you're helping them pray through or praying for or having other issues that you're asking people to pray about? Like what obstacles are they facing or challenges you're facing as a business that are affecting them? Or,
Mhm.
maybe if you want to take it, I don't know if it's gone this far, but has anything affected how your ministry or how you're viewed by your employees based on the actions of other people?
Well, it depends. So some of my staff, they come from various places, backgrounds. Some of them have lived in America for various amounts of time. But sometimes it's just uh, praying over things like some may be studying for driver's license, right? And so when you move to America, you don't automatically get handed a driver's license, so you got to go through the whole process, and there's a process for that. And just so I've prayed over driver's tests, for them. We've just the various challenges people face when they start a new life in a new place, and so either prayed on over paperwork or forms or driver's license tests or things like that is um, part of it. Another thing I do, and this I was doing this before I went into business, but I'm doing it a lot now still, is I invite people over to my house for Thanksgiving or Christmas or and so to be able to invite people over, even it could be an opportunity to for some of my staff who are from a faraway place. It's their first time experiencing an American Thanksgiving, and so we invite them over. We're particular on what we cook. If they have dietary restrictions or religious beliefs concerning certain foods, we accommodate that. But that's just a great opportunity too. So there's a few opportunities like that. It's just because a lot of times if people are new to America, and I say new within the last 2 to 4 years, that's fairly new. There's a lot of challenges they face in just adjusting to a new life, new culture, starting a new life. I mean, I've helped people find apartments. I've directed people on where to go to get help with taxes. It's just sometimes just day to day life that if someone's new here, they're not familiar with, and as an employer or a friend, I can help them with that, or I can direct them to someone who can help them.
I like that you're inviting them over for holidays. I think that's important. I think that's something, I don't know. I do know some people who do that. We've done it. A lot of my friends have done it. But I also know a lot of people are not comfortable with it. And I get that. It's, when you're trying to operate outside your own norm, your box, it is uncomfortable. But I think that's one of the things about crossing the cultural borderlines, whether it's going to another country or as you're doing it, you're within the United States. I mean, granted, Cincinnati's a lot bigger than where you come from, and it's definitely far more diverse than where you come from. But if we're going to see the nations reached if we're going to see unreached people groups reached, if we're going to see the gospel, everyone gain access to the gospel, well, it's going to demand that we step outside our comfort zone. I think one of the things I've said this in the past, I don't think I've said this on my podcast, but and I'm sure you've come across this too. When we talk about cross-cultural work, when we talk about going or sending missionaries, there's a lot of statements like, "Oh, well, I couldn't do that because God. Well, why can't you?" Well, it comes down to either fear or something, or usually, often said, "Well, God hasn't called me to do that." Well, I question that God hasn't called me to do that because God has brought all those people here. So if maybe we're not called to go, let's say 8,000 miles away, like my family did, or like some of my colleagues are, but God has, if God's called you here, let's say here is wherever you're at, South Carolina, Cincinnati, Los Angeles, whatever. If God's called you to live locally, to serve him locally, I guess the question is, are you open enough to look at the people like you're trying to serve and bring them into your inner circle? Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to open up your house for Thanksgiving and Christmas? Are you willing to, you said you do English classes with a local group, very similar to my church has something called English Crossing, very similar thing. And, it is, the funny thing is all these people, as you know very, very well, they come from a very communal community. And it's like in our American Southern community, we're so independent minded that heaven forbid I invite you over for a holiday. If you're not family, you don't qualify. I don't care how close I am to. I mean, we're very closed in the sense of who we let in. To be able to reach these people who are in our communities, we have to be very open to inviting them in. I was listening to, and you probably heard some similar stories, and maybe someone has said this to you, but I was listening to something recently, and I've heard other people with international student ministry say the same thing, that they had met someone and they invited them to their home, and this person had lived in the States for 7-8 years. And this was the first time an American had opened their home for them to come, just to come in. It wasn't even a holiday. And they thought Americans didn't like them just because they were different. I mean, do your employees who are from any of those backgrounds, or the people in your community that you're around, I mean, do they face like challenges in this area? I mean, do they have like a feeling that they're unwanted, even though I would assume, like, your business being what it is, you have strict criteria of who you can hire and who you can't hire. And so if you're hiring them, I assume they're here legally. And so if they're here legally and they're in these communities, I mean, are they facing like similar backlash or problems? I mean, I bring this up not to be political, but the church needs to be challenged into thinking about these things, and also into praying about these people, praying for these people, and that if they're here under the right precinct or the right conditions, then we should be praying that they'll be fruitful while they're here, because if it benefits them, it benefits us. I mean, what do you see in the community you're around, whether they're employees or not, that maybe big challenges they face?
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely, the political season that America's in, it is, there is a lot of people who are emboldened to maybe harass an immigrant, to call them an insulting name. I've seen that here in Cincinnati, and of course, it's not just cities all over America. It happens, and they've experienced that. And I have had long conversations with immigrants here in Cincinnati who were insulted by someone on the street or in public. And it was it's troubling, and I've had to have long conversations with them, just trying to help them process their frustration with that, their hurt, their pain, their anger, that when they're insulted. It's and it's happened quite a few times that I've seen here in our community, and I've had to sit down and just have lunch with some immigrants and just let them know that, hey, you're loved, you're welcomed, you know, and just, you know, I can't really erase their experience that they experienced, but just try to help them process and just help them know that there are people here who care about them, and that followers of Jesus, true followers of Jesus who will follow his teachings, will care for them as well. Um, but yeah, it's unfortunate. It's an atmosphere that we sometimes deal with.
As a believer, I'm very much believe that irregardless of who someone is, we should be treating them as image bearers of God. We should be treating them as people who need the gospel. I mean, that is the most important thing any believer could do, is to treat someone as if they need the gospel, because they do. I want to ask you one last question, and this is just something for you to speak to the listeners. Like, as a businessman, obviously with experience in the nonprofit world, in a ministry environment, who's got a ministry plan within his business plan, like, what would you say to the average Joe, the average Jane in the pew, who is in the secular marketplace, irregardless, business owner, employee, doesn't matter. Like, what would you say to them? Like, how would you encourage and challenge them as it relates to their life and the kingdom?
Yeah, so I mean, thinking about doing this kind of work, this kind of strategy, um, what I think is really important is to look at your skills and your business and determine how that can intersect with people outside God's kingdom. And I'm probably not over speaking when I say that pretty much any skill used in context can be used for God's glory. And I think any business they can be examined to determine how does it intersect with people outside of God's kingdom. Now, for me personally, I'm focused on unreached people groups, particularly, but even a business maybe serving in a more church community could still be serving non-believers, and that could still happen. That strategy could still exist for that as well. But I think reviewing your skills, your business, your strengths, and how do those intersect, and how to adjust some of those to intersect. Um, and I don't know if I'm getting off topic, but I'll just throw this in that it is challenging, where because there's times when business is stressful, and there's times when business is very, very, very stressful, and you're trying to make profit, and you're trying to run a good business, and you've got your ministry goals, and you're trying to glorify the Lord, and business usually throws about 100 problems at you every day, only half of which that you've seen coming. And so it can be challenging as well. And so I think that, keeping perspective that even in the hard days, following the Lord, he has a plan. He can overcome business challenges. He can overcome any other challenges that you're facing, but it just comes, keeping a balance, watching that you're getting the right rest too. I mean, between business and ministry, you can put in a lot of hours, and it can be exhausting as well. So, just throwing that in as well is that, trusting God that He can open the doors. But just I'm constantly examining what do I need to be doing that maximizes my impact, and maximizes my contact with unreached peoples. Sometimes I'm just thinking about what I need to do today that will enhance my ministry 6 months from now, and so I'm trying to think ahead sometimes. But yeah, I really think it comes down to everybody has unique skill sets, and my skill set is in the restaurant industry. Someone else may have a very different skill set, but I think they can be used to operate a business or to gain impact among people. It's just a lot of analyzing, how it fits together, is what I would say.
As I close out this episode, I want to bring up two words that I think speaks to this conversation I had with Brian about his work in business, his ministry, how they're marrying and blending the two, and that is intentionality and discipline. Okay, to do what he does requires both. Now, anyone could argue, well, to do business, it requires intentionality in business. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about believers, born again Christians who are taking businesses, applying them to ministry within the kingdom of God, marrying the two, blending the two, whatever words you want to use, and having a plan for both business and ministry and how to do them concurrently. And that's exactly what Brian is doing. Now, I know he couldn't say which company he works for, which restaurant he has, or anything like that. I can say this. It is a significant business that he has. He's placed it in a strategic location based on ministry, but he's also making money. He is for profit. He's taking care of his family, but his priority is the kingdom. And as his priority is the kingdom, God is taking care of everything else for him. So he is running a very successful restaurant business. And so I invite him on here just to encourage and challenge you. Again, whatever business or marketplace job you're in, I would just encourage you to look at that work you're doing, the business you're doing, whether you're a doctor or a teacher or a plumber or whatever it is. Look at that from a kingdom perspective. Find ways to transition your life from just doing work for income or doing business to make as much money as possible to focusing on what you can do to impact the kingdom as priority. Because I'm not afraid to say it. I believe that is exactly what we should do as the global church. Yes, we are to take care of our families. We are to do everything we can to take care of them. There is no question about this. In fact, the Bible talks about if you can't take care of your family, you're worse than an unbeliever. But it also talks about that we are to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. That is the greatest commandment. So in the greatest commandment, our business, we should be leveraging our business, our vocation to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And that includes making disciples. And until next time, don't forget to live bold, live courageous, live Enviado.